Okay, guys, let's take a look at some guys underperforming and overperforming players across the NBA and some guys you might be able to buy low or even sell high on at the moment. Over the last couple of weeks, Bojan Bogdanovic of the Indiana Pacers is the 204th ranked player in fantasy leagues now, with Victor Oladipo out for the season. I feel pretty good about Boyan being able to increase on that. And part of the reason he's down so low is he's shooting an uncharacteristic 38% from the line. Sorry, not from the line. He's 92 from the line. He's 38% from the field and under 30% from three. This is a guy who's been knocking in 40% of his threes consistently. The positive there is the increase in usage and the increase in free throw rate with Oladipo out and that high free throw percentage. And when that field goal percentage and 3-point percentage comes back up, he's going to vault back up into top 100 type consideration. So if anyone's really downtrodden on the way that Boyan has performed over the last few games, now could be an opportunity for you to strike it and buy low on him. The next guy I want to talk about, he hasn't really been very nice, Gary Harris. He's 199th over the last 2 weeks, and he just got slapped with another questionable tag today, a right groin soreness. That is obviously causing a problem. But 199th over the last 2 weeks, people are ready to give up on Harris this season. There's no doubt about that. And that, to me, means that is absolutely the buy low moment for him. Go and get him. And if someone is willing to drop him, you can give your worst player and potentially get Harris back. Now, he's nowhere near where he was last year. 41st ranked player last season, 68th the year before, 102 the year before that. So we're talking this year as being his worst season in the last four. But why is that? Well, for some reason he can't hit shots. 43% from the field and 32% from three. He's been a 40-plus guy from three the last two seasons. He's been a 54% two-point shooter the last 2 years. He's down at 32 and 50 for three and two-point percentage this season. So the shots just aren't falling. His other numbers, his steal rate, well down. 1.9 per 36 last season, 1.1 this year. The only thing he's really managed to improve this season is his rebound rate, gone from 2.7 to 3.7, which is numbers that were more commensurate with what he'd been doing previously in his career. So the injuries are clearly impacting Harris. That's a real issue, but to me, he is a real buy low guy because if the shot starts to fall, and again, I can't add these up the top of my head. So over the last three seasons, roughly 200 games played where he had really strong percentages. This season, 31 games. I will weight myself with the 200 game sample versus a 30 game sample as to him getting corrected. We saw it with Klay Thompson earlier this season that he wasn't going to be a 31% 3-point shooter. Then he went 50% from three throughout this month for majority of this month. And I don't think Harris is necessarily going to get back to that level, but there is significant improvement coming with him. The artist formerly known as Torian Prince, 197th over the last 2 weeks. The minutes not quite there yet, but 29 a game, and he is shooting poorly too. 37 from the field and 71 from the line. I liked him as a sleeper this season. He's been a little bit disappointing with his shooting and with that ankle injury, which cost him a ton of time across the December-January period. If anyone had hopes of him being that guy that he was in April last season, that was always unrealistic. But he can be significantly better than he is here. Now, I think he's a little bit overrated as an actual NBA player. And there's been guys step up like Herter on this team, like Trae Young having this big role, like John Collins becoming an animal. That has limited what Prince can do, but he can be a better shooter than this. The 22% from three is not going to stick, 37 from the line isn't, and he is absolutely worth grabbing if someone drops him, or if you want to throw that buy low offer at whoever has him. Number 196, Domantas Sabonis. Really, foul trouble has limited him of late, and he is down this low mainly for that reason. Under 23 minutes a game, 11 and 8. He's never blocking shots. He's never getting steals, and he's obviously not doing that at the moment. The assists are pretty low, and his free throws, they're not really going in either. 65% from the line over these last 6 games, and 54% from the field. And while 54% from the field is still pretty good, this is a guy whose value has been based on the fact that he's hitting 61% of his field goals this season, although that has dropped pretty significantly over the last couple of months as it's starting to come back in line. And it was, again, one of those things that we talked about at the start of the season that really never had much of a chance of sticking at that sort of a level, but he's also gone backwards in that area at the moment, and you're probably looking him on the downswing of his value and maybe a chance to reacquire him and get that value back up to somewhat approximate where it was earlier in the season, maybe not quite that high. Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr., the 152nd ranked player over the last couple of weeks. Only one block a game in 27 minutes. We know the fouls do limit him. He's not rebounding very well. The numbers for him are quite pedestrian at the moment, but I feel pretty strongly that he's going to have a top 50 stretch here at some point to end the season. Well, that's the hope, I guess, that he can get himself back to that level. But it has been somewhat of a struggle for Jackson at the moment, and again, those fouls just never seem to go away with him, unfortunately. If only he could, but some of that is on him, some of that's on Bickerstaff as well, not trusting him to be able to play through it. Number 149, I detailed him quite a bit on yesterday's show. Otto Porter Jr. The shots just aren't going in. That's resulting in 2 or 3 fewer minutes per game. It's meaning that he's scoring fewer points because rebound numbers, assist numbers, steal numbers, block numbers, they're all the same as where they've been in the past. What's happening is we're seeing a 4 or 5% true shooting percentage point drops, and that's what's impacting him. It's taking the 2 minutes away, it's taking scoring away, it's taking 3-pointers away, it's taking a positive contribution in field goal percentage and free throw percentage away. So that's why he's down just inside the top 150. And when that sort of stuff comes back, which again, like Harris, I'm talking about 3-year, 200-game type sample for Porter versus 40 games this year, I feel okay about it coming back. It might not come all the way back, but what we're seeing from him at the moment is an increased usage with wall out, and we just need the shots to start to fall. And I do tend to trust an elevated sample size, which again is been happening over the course of this of his career versus the 40s odd games. He's played 38 games so far this season. He's dealt with injuries as well during that time, and it's obviously been a trying time, but to me that is a real buy low opportunity for a guy that when we get into the business end of the head-to-head season could be really putting up maybe top 60, maybe top 50 type of numbers. De'Aaron Fox is down a little bit at the moment as well, 139th over the last 2 weeks. He's a guy I talked about quite a bit as when he was in that top 20 zone, he was a massive sell high to me. There was so much unsustainability with his field goal percentage, and it's gone back the other direction now. 40% from the field over his last 5, 73 from the line, only 1 steal and down to 6.5 assists with just 15 points. They're numbers that are more in line with what he did in his rookie season, where he was one of the worst players in the NBA. Now, I'm not saying that that's who he is, but I'm also saying that some of the numbers earlier in the season weren't realistic for Fox to be able to keep up because he just isn't that good of a mid-range shooter that he was showing during that time frame. But with things swinging in the wrong direction, it probably hasn't swung far enough in that wrong direction for people to be completely out on him, but the production of late hasn't been that good. He's still the 39th ranked player this season, but over the last month, he's outside the top 50, and as for now, 140th over the last couple of weeks because those shots haven't been falling with as much regularity. So the sites, ESPN, they got their last 15 player ratings. That's where he's going to be dropping down, and that's where maybe we're looking at an opportunity to get him at a bit of a discount. 129 is Jeremy Lamb. I think he's a pretty comfortable top 100-ish sort of guy. He's just not shooting the ball well. The steals aren't there for him either. Only half a steal a game in the last 6, 41% from the field. And they're the two things that when they jump back up, then a 30-40 spot rise in the rankings is hard not to see, really. And down at the pointy end of the rankings, Bradley Beal of the Wizards, 31st. Now, he is a guy that is, probably got top 10 upside for this season. He's the 17th ranked guy over the course of the season. But what's happening here is he's a 47% shooter this season. Over the last 6 games, 42%, including 33% from 3. And when you drop by 5 percentage points in field goal percentage, it takes you from being an average guy in that category to being a significant negative. And then field goal percentage, why that has such a big impact on things is when that drops, not only does that create big negatives, but it takes away your points and it probably takes away your threes as well. So it's impacting 3 categories as opposed to, like if your steal rate drops, it impacts 1 category. If your assist rate drops, it impacts 1 category. If your field goal percentage drops, it impacts 3 categories. And that's why that can have such a big impact and why you see guys who fall down the rankings, fall down mainly because of big drops in that category, and also guys who jump up the rankings jump up because of big rises in field goal percentage because of its impact across 3 separate categories. Speaking of those overperforming players, over the last 2 weeks, Al Horford is the 13th ranked player. He's averaging 2.5 blocks and shooting 64% from the field, averaging 18 and 9. Now, Horford's great. This is unrealistic. It's coming on 20% usage, which is about right. He's not a 64% shooter. He's not a 2.5 blocks per game guy. I think we're all aware of that. Maybe look for the Boston Celtics fan in your league. Maybe look for someone who's really skewed by recent performances, the guys who want to drop someone after one bad game. Inversely, after a good game, they're ready to buy and really bank on Horford being this guy. You might not find it, but it is worth noting that he is not going to be this good. Brook Lopez, the 28th ranked guy over that same time frame, because he's averaging 3.2 blocks. You know what? That's not that much of a stretch for Lopez. 2.7 triples, not that much of a stretch. Spencer Dinwiddie called him the best player that he's ever played with, and that's, did he say best or maybe most skilled, most talented? Whatever he said, he had pretty high praise for Lopez, but he is averaging 2.1 blocks per season. So this 3.2 block scenario is interesting, but again, why is he so high? Well, he's shooting 57% and 50% from three during that time frame, and 71% from two-point land. So huge elevation, a true shooting of 74%, which is obviously really, really hard to keep up, especially shooting 50% from three on over 5 attempts per game, which is what Lopez has done over the last 6 games. So there's going to be a drop-off. It's probably not going to drop him off all that far, but he's also not going to be able to maintain this level of production, because really nobody can do that. Number 39, The Undertaker, Dwayne Dedman. He's averaging 14.6 with a steal and 1.2 blocks, 58% shooting, and 2 threes, including 43% from three. Those numbers, they're not ridiculous for him to be able to keep up. I think that the trade risk with him is real, and where he goes to in a trade, he won't be playing 25 minutes most likely. This is a real hot shooting streak, this 58%, especially. Now, he was able to do that at times when he was in San Antonio. We have to remember, Dedman's been good for a while, 3-4 years at least. That last season in Orlando, the first season in San Antonio where he was underutilized by Popovich, and these 2 seasons in Atlanta, he's been pretty good. But that field goal percentage, since he started taking threes, is not going to stick at that level. 2 threes per game on 43% is probably not going to stick. He is a must-roster guy. He's not a top 40 player, I don't think. Number 54, Marcus Smart, who's been electric. He had a massive game the other day without Kyrie. He's averaging 11 and 4 with 2 steals on 43 and 91. So the big red flag there is the 43% from the field, but also the 41% from 3, the 2 steals, the 4 assists. There's some, look, Marcus Smart is a must-roster guy. I don't think he's a borderline top 50 player. 64 is Thad Young, averaging 14 and 8. His steals are low, so there's room for that to improve, but he's at 55 and 80 from the field and from the line, and those are numbers, especially that free throw percentage for Young, where he's been like a 55% guy at times. That is 20-25% percentage points higher than where it is normally for him, and that has boosted his numbers pretty significantly. And unlike field goal percentage, which does influence 3 categories, free throw percentage increases or influences 2 categories, points and free throw percentage. So when that drops off, if he goes back to being a lower guy there, it's going to impact his points. Not that much, because he's only taking 1 free throw a game. But instead of getting 0.8 points per game, he could be getting 0.5 points per game. And that's enough to make a difference in both of those categories to have an impact there for Thad Young. Number 65, Brandon Ingram. This to me is the biggest sell high moment, especially after yesterday's game. He's averaging 20 points per game, almost 5 assists. And you can say, well, Josh, if he goes to another team, he's going to have the ball in his hands. And that's true. But I feel pretty good about saying he's not going to be a 59% shooter, which is including 61% on 2s. He's shooting 38% on 3s on almost no attempts. But that field goal percentage is not a realistic number for Ingram to be able to keep up. That's going to impact so much of what he does. Steals and blocks are low. He just won't be this guy. And on the back of yesterday's performance, trade rumors swirling. It is the perfect time to try and offload Brandon Ingram if you can get that sort of value back. The last guy I want to talk about is Willie Cauley-Stein of the Sacramento Kings, shooting 66% from the field over his last 6 games, 10 and 8, not blocking any shots at all, which is obviously really disappointing for a big man to just not block anything. His shot blocking this season has been disastrous, 31 block shots only this year. But what's happening here, he is at 66 from the field. He's at 53 for the season. So we're seeing a big spike. In fact, he's had a 13 percentage point true shooting spike over the last 2 weeks versus what he's done over the course of the season. The Kings have been whispered to be in the mix for other centers. Maybe it's Enes Kanter. I don't believe they're fully sold on Willie Cauley-Stein, as they shouldn't be, because he's not that good. And there's a real chance that the minutes could fall down here for Cauley-Stein. But one thing I feel good about is that field goal percentage is not going to stick at that level, and that's going to cause a 20, 30, 40, 50 spot tumble in his ranking numbers.